Hello, Prianka Sharma. Welcome to the channel Kahanis Golden Bytes. Thank you for taking out your time. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Jovi. I think before we start, I think I should really, commend the effort that you're putting in. I think storytelling is probably the best way that you can get inspired or inspire others. So I think it's a brilliant effort. So really commend you for that.
Thank you for that, Priyanka. Thank you for that. And Priyanka, for the benefit of our viewers, could you just give a little background about what you're doing, what you've done, a brief background, Priyanka?
Sure, Jovi. So just to I probably can't give my entire journey, but I'll probably start. So I passed out. I have majored in HR from one of the B schools in Jamshedpur called XLRI. And post that, so I've had, I think it's been almost 7-8 years now. So I've been working on the corporate side in banking, then moved briefly to in the development sector, and currently I'm the talent head for an organization called MediaCom, which is part of a larger MNC called GroupM, which is one of the largest media and advertising groups in the world.
Lovely. It's just excellent. It's I'm very happy to hear that. And as we delve in, your experience is really going to come in handy. I want to pick your mind a little bit. You mentioned also development side. You've also worked in banking and development also, Priyanka.
Yeah, Jovi. So I can talk about that. So actually, Standard Chartered Bank was the campus placement that I had, and it's a brilliant organization. And I think I interned with the bank as well, and then I got an offer to join them, before I passed out. So a brilliant 3 years there. But post 3 years, there was something, that was there at the back of my mind that I wanted to experiment with. So with Standard Chartered as well, I was working on their CSR agenda very closely. So somehow it came in that what if I try to make this my full-time career, because that was something that really energized me. So eventually then what I did was I applied for a global fellowship program. It's called the LGBT Fellowship, and they choose around between 10 to 15 global fellows. So they are working across LATAM, Africa, a lot of developing markets, and it includes India as well. So I got chosen for that fellowship, and it was a huge shift for me, Jogi. It wasn't an easy decision. I think,
I'm
leaving
sure.
a very cushy corporate job and, delving into something which is completely, unknown to me. But I think it was a brilliant learning experience for me as well. So I worked with an organization called Educate Girls. It is one of the LGT portfolio companies, and they focus on the inequality in the education sector for girls specifically. So while in my role I supported their people strategy per se, but that's what the organization is about.
So, in that space of LGT, was it you were dealing with various countries? So, did India also? You mentioned India, but were you looking into the India aspect also at that point in time?
Yeah, so how the LGT fellowship works is, so they have essentially they are venture capitalists for the social sector. To briefly summarize the work they do. So what they do is since they realize that giving money to these organizations is not enough, there is a huge dearth of talent in this sector. So they try to get fellows from the corporate background, use their expertise and how they can support the NGOs that they have invested in. So Educate Girls was one of the NGOs in India that they had invested in at that point of time. And so my job was, because they were scaling up almost 5x in a very short time. So that of course comes with a lot of HR and people implications. So they were looking for someone who kind of supported that agenda, and my profile kind of fit in there. So an incredible journey. I think it took me to really rural parts of India, and working on a completely corporate side to moving to this side. I think a tremendous experience for me.
And that was a full-time experience. It was a full-time job. It wasn't that you were with Standard Chartered. You were full-time into this
No,
organization.
absolutely. It was a full-time commitment. So the fellowship lasts for around 11 months. That's the turnaround time. And Educate Girls as an organization felt that they needed more of my services for a slightly longer time because HR as a function, it does take a longer time to kind of implement the
True,
things you
true.
start off.
Yes.
So in fact, I continued for another year and a half with Educate Girls after completing my fellowship with them.
Wow, wow. So, did you? So you worked in different parts of rural India in that case when it came to educate girls, the initiative.
Yeah, so in fact, they were in approximately between 13 to 15 districts in Rajasthan and MP the time that I was associated with them. And they have in fact identified where there is the maximum gap in the literacy ratios in the
Okay.
or the enrollment ratio of girls in schools.
Okay.
So
And
they started with a district called Pali in Rajasthan, and when I was working with them, we were expanding to districts like Jhabua in Madhya Pradesh. So a lot of travel to these places, kind of understanding what so the people issues that they are facing, and it's completely different to corporate. Like it's a different India, I think I would say, and being brought up in the urban side of India, I think it's very difficult for us to fathom the kind of challenges we face there.
so, so Priyanka, so that was a big shift from an XLRI specializing in human resources, working for a bank, world-renowned bank, and then rural India in the truest form and sense. The various variations of that. So that was, as you mentioned, a complete shift in. So what was something that was striking you when it came to, and because you work with educate girls and the literacy part, what was something very striking to you? What struck you, amongst a couple of things in the areas where you worked in the areas that you worked in?
Yeah, surprisingly, Jovi, I think people issues. So my current role, which is media and advertising, it's my third industry per se, right? And but I would have to say that people issues are extremely similar across the industries. While these are vastly different worlds, and I think if you look from an outsider's view, the banking industry, the development sector, and the media and advertising industry, probably you will not kind of correlate it in any way. But from an HR front, I think people at the end of the day when we come to work, we are looking for something which is purposeful and which gives us learning and growth opportunities, which kind of makes us utilize our potential to the fullest. So these are the common themes I think across sectors, Julie. And while the nuances of it, like what does being having a growth, what kind of a growth mindset you have, probably would slightly differ, but essentially that's common across the three verticals.
Other industries. Wow, wow. And Priyanka, that you've worked in all these different industries, these different sectors, uh, let me bring about uh, the aspect of working women, working workforce, and women leaders in these industries. So Priyanka, you form part of the leadership that is going to shape the future of the country and various industries. You belong to that category of people. You're already a leader. In the years ahead, dramatic changes are going to take place, and you're going to be part of that. Now, Priyanka, what is given where all you've worked, what is your experience in terms of there's one aspect where studies of all kinds are there, but some studies show women are more comfortable and participate very well. But when it comes to leading, there's a hesitation to raise up the hand. Uh, you know, what do you think? You know, could be some of the reasons for that, or could some of that change, Priyanka?
Yeah, Joby, I think it's very interesting to see how women are becoming part of the workforce, and I don't think it's a challenge that only India faces.
Hmm.
This is something which is a global challenge, right? So
Yes,
even if you look
yes,
at the Fortune 500 companies, how many of our Fortune 500 CEOs are women,
very true.
right? So I think what I feel strongly is there is a lack of role models also for us.
Hmm.
So, what does it mean to be a leader and be a woman, there are very few examples that we can kind of lean into to kind of absorb in our own lives and kind of emulate as well. So I think that is one key gap. But we've had a lot of leaders in the recent past. So slowly, I think that shift is happening within, be it in Indra Nooyi and Pepsi or Leena Nair and
Yes.
Unilever. We still are able to see that there are certain women leaders that we can look up to. So I think that is one thing that is very, I think that it's extremely lacking. And the second thing is, Joby, when you look at a CEO or a leader, there are certain, type A personalities or attributes that we associate a leader with. So a lot of things like empathy and, compassion are not something that we are typically used to have a leader having. So we do have, say, a Jacinda Ardern in New Zealand, right, who's
Yeah.
done brilliantly well over the past year.
Absolutely.
So it's about keeping the qualities that women bring to the table, and how does that impact the whole paradigm of leadership. I think that is something that is going to evolve as we move on in the years ahead.
And Priyanka, you're in the thick of it, and you're seeing organizations adapt and getting ready for this kind of change. Priyanka, are you seeing that happen right across?
Yeah, absolutely, Jody. So just to share, a few weeks back, I co-hosted a session on the power of vulnerability in the workplace, and we had two leaders who we were kind of interviewing there, and one was a woman CEO and one was a man CEO. And the male counterpart definitely said that it's not easy for me to be vulnerable because of the patriarchal society that we've been brought up in. As a man, I do find it difficult to be vulnerable. But having said that, nowadays people associate more with a leader who is okay to show his vulnerable side in the workplace, which probably comes easier to a woman than a man because of the way we've been kind of raised.
Very true, very true. There's a dramatic shift happening. There is, both are getting involved. There is formative action that is being expected and, being asked for. So all
Yeah.
that is, absolutely coming through. And Priyanka, what a lot of people share and is that people's childhood plays an important role in wherever they are, wherever they work or whatever they do go about in life. Given your experience, uh, what would you be very passionate about when it comes to this topic of women leaders? How has it shaped you? How are things that are some things of your childhood or your upbringing, your education? How is it going to be of what is something that you are very passionate about and you want to feel and you feel very strongly about and you want to bring it to the workforce? What is something? Is there something like that, Priyanka?
Sure, Julie. So if I can take the liberty of sharing my personal
Please,
story.
lovely.
So
Please,
so
thank
my
you.
my father, he hails from a village in UP called Bamnodi, which is very close to the Haryana border. And in fact, the female feticide levels are probably the highest in that particular zone or that area of Haryana. And so while my father was extremely different, and me and my sister both feel extremely privileged, that he was different and he gave us, the wings to fly and
Lovely,
do pursue
lovely.
whatever we wanted. But however, it's not a reality, Jovi, that is unfortunately there in many parts of India.
Yeah.
So just to share a statistic, I think even in the B schools we hardly have 19% women applicants today.
Applicants.
Applicants. I'm not even talking about
My
the final
admission. Yeah.
admissions. In fact, in COVID recently, that we were reading, the participation of women in the workforce has dramatically dropped down by around 4%, right? Because women are looked forward to take up more support roles, etc. So I think I'm extremely passionate about the fact, Judy, that we need to make the change at the grassroots level. There is no way that corporates can kind of change that unless there is a funnel of talent kind of coming in. So when we look for candidates, when we are hiring, while we might have a diversity agenda, but there is a lack of the pool of talent itself. So that is not something that I think the corporates can solve for. It needs more affirmative action, probably from more from the public society to kind of solve for. So while of course corporates today are trying to do their best, But I think it has to be definitely be, a kind of a combined effort from a lot of agencies which will impact us.
So very true. And what would be your advice, Priyanka, to to two categories here, uh, to the women workforce, the younger workforce, women workforce, who are starting of their career or are in the the early stages of their career. One to them, and the other is to parents who have girl a girl child. To both these guys, what would be your advice to them? Going in the corporate space or wherever it is. You think?
Yeah. So, so Jovi, probably it would be wrong. I'm not a parent yet to give advice to any other parents,
But
but
you've been brought up, from that perspective. You've had a lovely set of parents who've brought you up in a lovely way, and you've
yes, yes,
gained from that. You've benefited from that.
absolutely.
Wonderful example. From that perspective.
Yeah, so one thing that I noticed, Jovi, and I think I was 13 when for the first time I visited the village that my dad hailed from, right? And I still remember that day very lucidly, because it was such a shock for me to know that such a thing existed. Like in his village, the men and the women can't even sit in the same house. There is a concept of a ghar and a gher. So the women actually sit separately than men, and that was such a shock for me, right? And my father hailing from such a place and still never letting us feel that particular difference. I think it's quite commendable. I think my advice to parents then definitely would be that they really need to protect us from probably the stigmas of the societies that have kind of developed over the years. So for parents, I think that's that. I think for a girl, I think of course we do live in an area which is, especially now that I'm in Gurgaon. I've recently relocated from Mumbai. I do understand that there are some environmental challenges in a country like ours. But having said that, I think it's more about what you personally feel that you want to achieve, and the limitations, the so-called glass ceiling, that they say. Sometimes it's more in your head than in the circumstances. So I think you should just kind of continue doing your best, and be it at work or be it at school or in your college, etc. And let these just ignore. If you feel that there is some sort of a glass ceiling there, it's best to kind of ignore and not spend your energies focusing on what that is and how it's impacting you.
Lovely. Thank you so much, Priyanka. I won't take more of your time. It's been a pleasure. I know your schedule is all, far too tight. And, I want to once again thank you for taking your time and sharing your views, your experience. Our viewers are going to enjoy it, Priyanka. Thank you so much for coming out and, speaking at our channel. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Jovi. It's been a pleasure.